The 8th of May 2024. I'm George Richardson and I'm chair of this committee and chairing today's meeting. Before we start, can I make sure everybody's got all the mobile devices and switched off or on silent, please? We have a number of officers with us this morning who I'll ask to introduce themselves, starting with Kirsty on my right.
Kirsty Charlton, Senior Committee Services Officer.
Neil Carter, I'm the solicitor to the committee.
Stephen Reid, I'm the Planning Manager, Chair.
Steve France, Senior Planning Officer.
Chris Shield, Senior Planning Officer.
Phil Harrison, Higher Development Manager.
Claire Teasdale, Principal Planning Officer.
Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies for our absence, please?
Councillors Atkinson, Higgins and Joplin.
And any substitute members, Kirsty?
Councillor Peake is substitute for Councillor Joplin.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest from any members? No. The minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of April 2024. Can we move those as a correct record? Thank you. So it's straight over to applications to be determined. And we go straight on to land at north and west of Armand Close, Spennymoor. Construction of 187 dwellings and associated open space. We've got two local members to speak on this, and two supporters and a local resident. But we'll start with Steve, please. Thank you. Steve France.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. First application, as you've just heard, is for the construction of 187 dwellings and associated open space on land north and west of Armand Close in Spennymoor. The site is to the west of Spennymoor, to the north of Middleston Moor. You can see the site outlined in red at the top left-hand side of the screen there. And some pertinent features which we'll no doubt discuss along the way is obviously it's on the edge of settlement in open countryside. To the immediate west of the site, you can see on this plan the beginnings of the Gleeson's development being built, which was a development which was approved on appeal for about 300 units. To the north of the site, you can see the Auckland Way, the walkway, cycleway that goes along there. And a school which is along Whitworth Road. Whitworth Road will be one of the main contentions of this potentially. This is the road that runs from the crossroads here along the edge of the site, and there's a tree belt which is particularly high ecology value of wet woodland which separates the site from Whitworth Road. There's a field gate there which you'll see in the photographs. On the other side of Whitworth Road, you can see the academy. And on the screen there, you can see both other schools in the vicinity and the relationship to the town centre, which is in the top right-hand corner of the screen there. You can also see the A688, which sort of bypasses the settlement and leads into it, with the large roundabout there with the police station and supermarkets above it. That's an aerial version of this. Again, bottom left, you can see that Gleeson's development coming along. It's actually far more developed now. This is a photograph is of some age. And likewise, the Whitworth Academy has had a bit of development in it as well in terms of sports pitches and the like. But from this, you can see how from a SHLAR assessment, SHLAR being the operation to identify sites before the county plan, this site was identified as in the countryside and not well related to it, and separated from the main potential access by that woodland. You can see how that Gleeson's development has sort of brought it in, and that is how the policy assessment against policy 6 has resulted in this being considered by officers in principle acceptable. Went out on site yesterday, but I've got a few site photographs for you. The top two photographs are looking from that Gleeson's development and the public right-of-way, the bridle way that serves the farm, east towards the site. In the middle photograph, you can see the large tree, which is the one feature of note which is on the site itself. After that, the existing flora is around the periphery of it, so Top right, you can see the belt of trees which goes along the back of Almond Close, which we walked into slightly yesterday. But from the rest of the photographs, and particularly those along the bottom, you can see that the site's broadly flat, open, unimproved grassland, and you can see there are informal paths where people have made their way across the site for dog walking and recreation, although not necessarily with any rights. But bottom left, you can see Page Grove, a development of bungalows with a two-storey property in the corner of it, which is the main immediate neighbour with it. Other boundaries with the existing development are separated by a bund and that woodland. So middle, again, is looking at the broadly flat site, and bottom right is the two-storey house, I think it's number 6 in Page Grove, which is one of the objectors which faces across the site and has concerns about residential amenity. Site entrance is contentious, so the application when it came in was for 214 houses to be served off Whitworth Road, and that was after extensive discussion concluded unsafe and incapable of being made safe for residential access into this type of development. The developer went and looked to see if there were other accesses into the site and identified where the site attaches to the existing estate. There's a gap where a public footpath that runs along the edge of that estate goes through, and that's visible top left and top right. Top left is effectively over the table. You can see the green space there with the trees, and that's where the new site access is proposed, with Almond Close immediately behind it. There's both a footpath there, a formal one, and an informal footpath leading into that woodland where fences have been pushed over to allow access into that. You can see from this, it's a modern estate with wide roads, the details of which are in your report in terms of their dimensions and their capacities. And you can see it is traffic calmed, and there is this lighting throughout. The loop, effectively, which would take you to the site from my direction from the estate, which consists of Bluebell and there's two different characters to it. One is quite open, and the other's a little dense, but the highway specification is maintained throughout in terms of its acceptability in highways and planning terms. The existing estate is shown at the bottom as well. Mulberry Drive. I always stop. One of the contentions is that the existing estate has areas of open space and some play equipment which would be accessible to the new estate. We see this in basic terms as an advantage to make this a logical extension rather than a separate entity in its own right. But there is some contention about the maintenance of that with the current maintenance charges that residents of the existing estate pay for that. The estate has been redesigned, the proposed estate, to align with the footpaths and the vistas through that, again, to try and integrate it so this appears as a logical extension rather than something new tacked on the edge. So bottom right is the access through the higher density part of that route to the development on Mulberry Drive. Effectively, the top two left-hand photographs are through Bluebell and where it's slightly less dense. I thought it was worthwhile putting some photographs as well of Whitworth Road just to show why we've come to a conclusion that this isn't safe. It's very much a rural highway and appears, notwithstanding it's got the top left-hand photograph has the grounds or the campus of the school on it. Drivers going along there, whether you put signs, whether you put lines, whether you put additional traffic calming, will see that as a rural road and they will drive along it accordingly. We couldn't find a way of making that safe despite extensive discussions, albeit that it should be noted that the construction access is proposed through the existing field gate, which is that top middle photograph. That's acceptable because it's temporary and it can be controlled in terms of its left in, left out only, and the volumes and the types of traffic are acceptable. Top right is the photograph to show what wet woodland looks like. It's not just flooded, it's supposed to look like that, and it's very high value. And that was one of the things the Schlar assessment sought to protect. The bottom left photograph shows the exit from the settlement. That's one of the bungalows in Page Grove you can see on the left-hand side. And that field access, where the access was originally proposed, was just on the corner of that at the end of their fence. Again, there's more photographs of the traffic calming and just the nature of that road to show it as a rural highway. And then bottom right, the householder of the bungalow there kindly allowed me to take photographs from their garden, although I didn't manage to catch them on the day. But you can see the aspect across the site towards the hedge in the distance there, which forms the extent of the estate. The development then is proposed access through that open space off the end of Mulberry Drive and Bluebell. You can see effectively there's a spine road through the middle of it with hammerheads going off it. Notable features are the separation from the wet woodland and the inclusion of the suds areas there, which is designed to flow into it. So it's not just for drainage, it's designed to improve the ecology as well. There is a pedestrian link proposed on that farm, existing farm access that would allow children in particular access to the academy. There's pavements, crossings and street lighting from downwards from there towards the academy. And there's a footpath, a lit footpath that does go along north from there that would allow access onto the Auckland Way, which I pointed out before. The scheme includes for 20 bungalows for particular interest, hopefully for older potential residents. And these are clustered in a development more or less by themselves in this part of the site with one additional semi-detached off the end of it. Affordable housing is spread throughout the estate in terms of what we're securing. The affordable housing actually being built into this far exceeds the policy requirement, but as you know, we can only really secure, and we're only really interested in planning terms on what can be secured for the policy. So that's 28 units, 15% of the scheme in this area. Other parts of the scheme that have been amended to benefit it are footpath links through to this play area in the open space, but not just to the play area, to allow pedestrian access through the estate into the bus stops on Durham Road. It's one of the benefits and the real pluses of the design of the existing estate is it's made a benefit of the easements where they couldn't build to provide open spaces and good pedestrian permeability to it. You can also see there's links from this to the public bridleway there. That again is to stop the sort of casual trespass which is already starting from the Gleeson's estate to the west, where fences are being pushed over and even cut through to allow access onto that bridleway. So trying to anticipate those desires for access to the countryside and footpaths and build them into the scheme. You can see on the entrance, obviously the existing entrance is a footpath and it's got trees alongside it. That will have to be cleared for the access to go in, but there is tree planting proposed both around the third suds pond, which is in the area there, and alongside the backs of the houses at Almond Close, which we walked along the back of yesterday. Again, the house types have been improved through the course of the application to give something quite distinctive, and the disposition of materials have reinforced that across the development to give character areas to the point where an original criticism of the design from design officers and the design review panel has come back positive in terms of the redesign and how this appears. There's elements of layout detail, and I'll put this on in case, as much as anything, you want to revisit this in your discussions. But from left to right, the two left-hand images sort of work together and show the entrance and the suds pond. And the relationship, you can see that white area is the remaining woodland, which is unaffected, which is out with the site. And then the two images on the right show the separation both from Almond Close and from Page Grove. And where there is a relationship to those bungalows in Page Grove, that is with gable ends facing towards the existing bungalows, and that two-storey property in the corner that I pointed out. Those separation distances are in excess of 20 metres. In those sort of relationships, we're usually asking for about 13, so they're well in excess of that. A footpath link that was proposed along the bottom on the original scheme has also been designed out. There is obviously a desire line there, which is existing, which the proposed landscaping will try and monitor, but there were both residents who identified that as area for antisocial behaviour in terms of where the woodland was, but other residents who saw it as a positive area, which sort of balances it out. So in terms of the proposed residential and amenity relationships to the existing, we're comfortable with it. The drainage in the area effectively goes north-east towards this site from the existing estate. So hence the Suds Ponds being there. And there's a condition in there which requests that some additional details provided of the drainage immediately on this entrance down there at the back of those bungalows at Page Grove. It was a concern of residents. Some of that information has already been submitted, but it was very late in the process, so we haven't had a chance to formally assess it. So there's a precautionary condition there if you wish to approve this. One other thing to mention, if I may at this point, is that the ecology is something that was discussed until late in the day, and that was resolved in terms of the species that use the land at the moment, such as skylarks, and in terms of the relationships to this wet woodland. The one thing I need to add to this is that the Section 106 agreement, again, should you wish to approve this, does need an extra line on it to secure the 30 years of monitoring and maintenance through a Section 39 agreement. So I'll remind you at the end if we get to that point, but there's an extra line for the Section 106 agreement to secure the wildlife. That looks like a lot of words, but there's only really one slide in terms of the consultee responses. And basically, spatial policy have set out the requirements for all the main policies. Policy 10 leads into Policy 6 effectively, and those criteria on this second attempt at the layout and access we think are meant. Highways have undertaken a detailed assessment of this in response to a transport assessment that the applicants had to do, and that is on a number of levels. It makes sure that there's sufficient car parking and safety within the estate proposed. It makes sure that the reasonable effects on highway safety through the proposed estate, the existing estate, are met both in terms of the transit of vehicles through it and the junctions onto Durham Road. And it takes into account the capacities of the wider highway network as well, the relationships to the town centre and the A688. And like I say, there's also an assessment as to the temporary use of that Whitworth Lane access for the construction traffic that's been undertaken and concluded acceptable. Obviously, we've got the highway engineer, senior highways engineer here to answer any detailed questions you might have on that. Affordable housing, that's met along with the requirements for first homes, for older people's housing, for level access. The vast majority, there's a couple of very short ones for garden length, but in terms of the policy requirements, this is a development which does tick its way through the requirements of the county plan in terms of the basic requirements. There's very little in terms of a balanced assessment needed for that. It ticks our boxes. I've highlighted the ecology there because the reports are always written 2 or 3 weeks in advance, and those discussions in terms of skylarks, and particularly the presence of newts on the other side of Whitworth Lane, were still under discussion. But ultimately, the mitigations proposed and the required level of BNG on this, acknowledging that when it came in, it was just a basic BNG uplift, not the more recent 10%, has been met. The education, again, needs to be pointed out. There's no request. There's a capacity, according to the County Education Department, for primary and secondary places. They did, in their response, request monies for SEND places. That's special educational needs and disabilities. The policy we will use to secure that in the future, and I believe Durham County are one of the first councils to get this in place, has not been passed yet, so we're not in a position where we can insist on that yet. But all the other mitigations that we've required through the development for open space, for play space, for the ecology, have all been met and are all detailed on the report with the recommendation for you. Landscape is one of the consultees who still raise an element of concern. As you saw on the photographs, there was one landscape feature on the site, which was that large tree near to the bridleway. And there's a hedge, an agricultural hedge, which runs along the main site boundary, which would now be the settlement edge. That's proposed to be beefed up and has been since the first iteration of this. But it's landscape officers always want more. It's not being the full structural planting belt which they originally asked for. In terms of how reasonable that is, I've had a look at what was required by the planning inspector on the adjacent Gleeson site, and I think it's fair to say that what is being provided here is a far better response than that was. And in terms of the weight we attribute to these, and we're having to be a lot more specific about weights, we attribute to things, given recent appeals and how inspectors are looking at these things. As a hierarchy, there is harm, but in the overall picture, we're attributing little harm to that. So we acknowledge it, but in terms of both the applicant's response and how that fits into the planning balance for supply of houses and the like, it's something that is not significant in the planning balance for us. There's a list of other consultees whose responsibilities have been met, requests have been met, or raised no objection who are listed there. An important part of the planning application, as you'll know, is the public consultation. And we have a member of the public representing local residents and 2 local members here to speak to you today. Over the 2 applications, we sent out 350 letters and we received 70 responses across the 2 iterations of the scheme. 25 after the reconsultation when the scheme was amended to take access through the adjacent housing estate. We sent letters to every single address on that estate and to Page Grove and to anyone else who might have been interested on the main approaches. There are significant concerns, it's fair to say, for highway safety, for residential amenity and for loss of ecology. Like say, antisocial behaviour from some, although that might be balanced out by being as a positive forever where it was identified. Flooding, for lack of need of houses, Spennymoor is a development hotspot at the moment, and that's a concern both in terms of the volume of people in it and the pressure that puts on local services and amenities, both the immediate ones for the play area and doctors, dentists and schools and the like. Construction disturbance, and identified, the focal point of that field access from Whitworth Lane and the residents in Page Grove is a concern, and you'll see there's conditions we've put on to mitigate that. Again, there's been some later information submitted, but they're in a precautionary form at the moment to ensure that all of the detail needed is under the control of the council if you're minded to approve this. I think that's probably it. The list of the consultees and the public concerns are set out at length in your report. In summary, and I'll gloss through this, there's a lot of words on that, but as I mentioned before, the lead policies are policy 10 through to policy 6, and we see this in light of recent developments, literally, as a logical extension to the settlement. The site is sustainably located with good access to services, transport links and facilities. The highways issues have been addressed in detail, both for the operational and construction phases. And the policy requirements for electric vehicle spaces and on-site parking and that sort of thing are all met. I'll mention it again, the county landscape officers do have that concern, but we've quantified that in the overall scheme of things. And we acknowledge residents' concern, particularly for the lack of dental care and the fairness of the maintenance payments, which I'm sure Mr Somerbell will be speaking to you about. The maintenance payments and the dental care, I think it's worth saying, aren't really in the control of the planning system. We have an assessed and agreed method for medical facilities, and you'll see the £90,000 that's in the Section 106 requested for that. But the way dental practice is set up is explained in your report, and it's not something we really have control over or can quantify in terms of assessing for mitigation. Overall then, the benefits of the proposal are considered to outweigh the identified harms. I will leave, as ever, the aerial photograph on the screen for you, but if members would like me to return to any image, I'm quite happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Well done, a very long and detailed presentation. Now we come to the local members, Liz Madison and Pete Malloy. You've both got unlimited time, but I hope you try and be as concise as you can. Liz, you're written down on my list first, so you can go first. Thank you. Yes, I asked you to speak if that works for you.
Hello, my name is Liz Madison. I'm County Councillor for Spennymoor Division, and this development is in my division. Spennymoor has been a building site for 20 years. We neither need or want this latest development. Our NHS services are at full capacity, as evidenced in this report. We have brownfield sites still underdeveloped, and some sites already approved are waiting for development. Some of these sites have provision for bungalows. The site north and west of Armand Close is a greenfield site. It is not on the county plan and is deemed as a windfall proposal. It is not allocated for housing. The policy has been introduced, Policy 6 has been introduced to develop this site as it is not allocated in the plan. This is concerning. This area is a development into the countryside. At the consultation, I raised the issues of drainage and potential flooding with climate change, and the surface water drainage and SUDS proposals are referred to in various parts of this planning report, and also the reference to this area being extremely wet. The development up from this proposed application has been subject to flooding in the past. Paragraph 5 refers for an area of woodland, often flooded, that separates the site from Whitworth Road, where SUDS basins are proposed. Paragraph 30, NPPF Part 11, makes reference to proposing the effective use of land in meeting the needs for houses and other areas, while safeguarding and improving the environment and ensuring health and other safety and healthy living conditions. Again, my objection here is that the flooding issue is a concern, and it does impact on other areas further down from this site. My own estate where I live is subject to flooding, and that has been as a result of a lot of developments further up, and I believe this to be another instance. Paragraph 32, NPPF Part 14, refers to meeting the challenge of climate change, flooding and coastal change. Whitworth Road is close to this proposed development and has been flooded on a number of occasions in the last year, and can be seen, and an area can be seen from the road where there are 2 flooded woodlands along this road. Policy 35, water management, requires development proposals to consider the effect of the proposed development on flood risk and taking account of the predictable impacts of climate change for the lifetime of the proposal, and no net increase in surface water runoff for the lifetime of the development by use of SUDS, and to protect the quality of the water. I am not convinced that this will be for the lifetime of the proposal. Paragraph 55 refers to access through Mulberry Drive and Bluebell Drive. Mulberry Drive is not considered a safe exit with pathways on both sides and a number of side cul-de-sacs. On Grayson Road, the exit is blind, again with parking on both sides. Recently, an extension of existing double yellow lines was put through, but for 1 car length maximum as stipulated by the officer. Exiting from this road is an issue onto a 40-mile-per-hour road. A request has been made for this to be 30 miles per hour. The request has not yet been considered. At Blueberry Close, the exit is blind due to high bushes on both sides that frequently need to be cut back. There has been multiple incidents at the Four Lane Ends junction due to speeding along Grayson Road, and this may have been to rush the traffic lights. Grayson Road to Whitworth Road and straight across from West Terrace Rock Road is one of the principal problems on this road. The barriers on the corners of Grayson Road to Whitworth Road and a corner of Clyde Terrace have been replaced on a number of occasions due to traffic incidents and potential speeding. I would like to ask a few questions of the developers. Paragraph 71 refers to the construction traffic left in, left out. Can I ask where construction traffic will leave Whitworth Road on their onward journey, as the Bransworth Road is narrow and subject to speeding? It also has a number of bends. At Newtown, wagons crossing together on both sides of this road have on occasion been stuck as the width of the road and the bends is an issue. Can I also ask the developer what the plan is for the offside play area and whether the maintenance will be undertaken by the developer's contractor or the local authority? To summarise, my concerns are that the exits onto Grayson Road are an issue. I am concerned with regard to the flooding potential for the lifetime of this development. There is mine workings in one corner of this site. The area is identified as a potential flood risk, and due to the number of developments that we have within our division, we really do not need any more developments. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Liz. Over to you now, Pete. I don't know whether Liz has left you anything to say.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pete Malloy, Spennymoor Division. The location of this proposed housing development of 187 dwellings will be on the adjacent land north of the two existing housing estates that have been connected by Mulberry Drive and Bluebell Drive, with the proposed entrance of the proposed housing development coming off Mulberry Drive. Entrance to the site for the construction traffic will be off Whitworth Road, and according to the Construction Access General Arrangement Plan, which has been submitted as part of the planning application, it states vegetation with invisibility splay to be cleared and maintained whilst temporary access in place. This means uprooting some of the hedgerow and possibly an oak tree as well, which are located near the current access to the site, because the site access will need to be widened to take the construction traffic, so we'll have some negative impact on the natural environment. With the number of vehicles belonging to residents on both the existing housing estates, there are already parking issues in this location, predominantly on Mulberry Drive, with residents parking their vehicles on both sides of the road, which can make it difficult sometimes for passing traffic to get to where they are going and have a potential safety risk for children playing. The parking issue problems on the existing estate, and in particular Mulberry Drive, has resulted in many vehicles being parked very near to the junction of Mulberry Drive and Grayson Road, which makes it difficult at times for drivers turning out of Mulberry Drive onto Grayson Road. This parking issue has been raised with DCC, and as a result, the double yellow lines at this junction will be getting extended on Grayson Road. However, With the number of additional vehicles that this proposed housing development will bring to both Mowbray Drive and Bluebell Drive, it will potentially exacerbate the already problem parking situation and general traffic safety concerns made to me by many of the estate's residents, as well as an increase in vehicle numbers in the general area that will put added pressure on the local road networks. With regards to school places for primary school children that may live on this proposed housing development, I have been informed by the headmistress of Middleston Moor Primary Academy, which is the local primary school, that last year the school was oversubscribed and with reception year children, and there is a waiting list on some year groups of children waiting for a place. So bringing more young families into the area could potentially create educational problems for primary school-aged children. With regards to getting an NHS dentist in Spennymoor, I have been informed by one Spennymoor resident that she could not register with a dentist in Spennymoor, and the nearest NHS dentist she could register with was in Billingham. I know we're talking to the receptionist at my dentist that they have over 1,000 people on their waiting list to register as a NHS dental patient, and they have stopped adding any more people to their waiting list. So the town's infrastructure would not adequately cope with an increase in population that this proposed housing development would bring. Spennymoor has had a lot of housing developments in the town in recent years, including in June 2022, the County Planning Committee agreed to the building of homes on a brownfield site off Merrington Lane that had not been allocated for housing. So the town has already had enough housing built on land not allocated for housing. I oppose this planning application for the reasons stated above, and because the site address, which is a greenfield site that is arable land, has not been identified in Durham County Council's County Durham Plan adopted 2020 for housing development or any other form of development, and if permission is granted for this application, it will be contrary to that plan, and it will also represent an incursion into the open countryside, which, due to the scale of the development, is likely to have some locally significant landscape and visual effects in the area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pete. We now go over to Gerald Somerville.
Good morning. I would like to start by just saying I fully endorse what both councillors have said, and most of their comments have been submitted by residents from the estate. We live at number 1 Almond Close. The main objections relate to the siting of the revised proposed access road, which enters the proposed development directly behind numbers 1 to 5 Almond Close. 3 of the residents have lived here since the properties were built in 2002. This road will mean the destruction of 20-year-old mature trees in the buffer zone and tree belt, which was a condition imposed under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 by Sedgefield Council on the then developer Maclean Homes for the approval for the building of homes purely in Almond Close as an amenity for residents, and which we feel in itself is a valid reason to reject the plan. Removing these trees will greatly affect the biodiversity of the area. Trees provide clean air and aid wildlife, and also provide protection against flooding, which this area is prone to. The flood risk will greatly increase if the trees are removed for the proposed access road, and also destroys the buffer zone. Northumbria Water have stated there is insufficient detail known about surface water. The original proposed access from Whitworth Road was rejected, but we understand construction traffic is to enter from this point temporarily for 2 years. If it is feasible as a temporary arrangement, then surely it is not impossible to make this a permanent solution. The committee's report is very detailed and contains many technical details, which are very difficult, if not impossible, for residents as lay people to understand, but is mainly about the development. There is very little reference, if any, to the buffer zone or the impact on the surrounding area, which we feel must be given greater importance. Several areas of the report appear to underestimate real-life figures. One example is the increase in traffic, estimated at 200 vehicles per day for the proposed 187 houses, assuming most homes will each have one car and only make 2 journeys per day. A more likely figure may be above 400 vehicles, not including service and delivery traffic, all joining a busy estate road which will then link to the main road. Residents are greatly concerned by the proposed access road, which will increase traffic, noise and pollution, and compromises the safety of existing residents. To put an access to a new development through 2 existing housing estates is both illogical and dangerous. The street lighting installed for environmental reasons exacerbates the dangers in winter months, all of which will affect our quality of life. The many objections and concerns raised by residents must be addressed, as they are as important as rules and regulations, yet seem to have been completely disregarded during this process. There have been 2,000 houses built in Spennymoor since 2016. This current proposal was not included in the county plan. Significantly, it is in a green belt, yet also in an area of open countryside enjoyed by all. We are disappointed that it seemed fit to override the plan only a few years after it was devised, and which residents will be greatly affected by the proposed development. The real picture and the long-term consequences of the development cannot be fully comprehended by simply considering plans and reports. And we are sure that following the site visit of yesterday,
1 minute remaining.
members will realise the concerns of residents, and they must be given equal, if not full, consideration. Finally, I would like to take this moment to remind the committee of the previously mentioned planning obligations of May 2000, wherein the council and the developer shall include their respective successors in title and assigns. Setchfield Borough Council and McLean Homes North East both attached their seals to this. In the detailed planning application, it was stated that the landscaping, which includes the belt of trees in the northwest and southwest boundary of the site, and such a scheme shall include an informal footpath in the tree belt. The current planning permission applied for would appear to ignore these provisions of the original planning permission and obligations, to the detriment of the existing residents. And I would like just to quickly add that for all the slides that were put up there, very little mention was made of Armand Close.
Thank you, Gerard. It was remiss not to mention that you had 5 minutes, which you've just about managed. We'll move on to the supporters, Joe Ridgeon and Andrew Rennie. As a result, you will have 2.5 minutes each, or between you, whichever, and Kirsty will let you know when there's 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Good morning, Planning Committee. My name is Andrew Rennie, and I'm the Development Director for Vistry North East. We're a partnerships-driven business building homes across the country on behalf of our client partners, as well as for ourselves to sell on the open market. We work hand in hand with housing associations, Homes England, local authorities and landowners to unlock sites of all types that are suitable for new homes. Vistry Group are the UK's leading provider of affordable housing and a 5-star house builder. We are also a strategic partner of Homes England. We value this close working relationship and experience we have gained as a strategic partner of the government's housing delivery vehicle. This has enabled us to unlock many new sites where others have failed, with a number of these located in County Durham. I've worked for Vistry for a little over 6 years, and during this time we've developed a sustained track record with the council. As an example, we are currently on site delivering over 500 homes in Bishop Auckland, with over 50% of these being designated as affordable. In addition to this, we're delivering homes for private rent and open market sale in parallel. This is a truly exciting approach to building houses, which, unlike other house builders, allows us to continue with less reliance on general market conditions, so we can build at pace. This creates place far quicker, bringing residents and faster formation of new neighbourhoods and communities, as well as other regeneration benefits, and of course, council tax receipts earlier into the authority. This way of working requires constant engagement with our stakeholders and partners, but the outcomes are far more rewarding for all, in my experience. We have delivered in this way at the former Durham-owned site at Robson Avenue, Peterlee, where we delivered a 71-unit extra care for Housing 21 and 67 affordable homes for Believe Housing. We also bring this same public partnership approach to Sunderland City Council with the regeneration of their former civic centre, as well as in our joint venture with Gateshead Council to unlock their challenging portfolio of brownfield land. County Durham and its settlements are well located in the North East region relative to transport infrastructure, major employers and other regional cities. This is what makes demand for new homes so significant in the county. Alongside the council's open for business approach...
Sorry to interrupt, but Gerald, can you switch your mic off? It's interfering.
Alongside the council's open for business approach is why we like working here. As with all local authorities, we appreciate Durham County councillors faced acute financial pressure. Our project will alleviate that pressure and provide much needed ratepayers, shoppers and citizens for our communities and the economy. And I'll pass you over to Joe Ridgeon in our team who will set out more details for our application. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not too sure how long I've got left, but just quickly to cover off the questions from councillors specifically, just in relation to...
Well, Joe, there will be a next... After the planners come back, there will be a space for questions from members, and you could answer that then if you want to leave it till then. Or do you want to carry on with your presentation?
Yeah, I'll just carry on. I'll cover it quickly. Just in relation to the construction traffic, there was a query about that. In terms of left out, they will continue on to the A690, and this is all set out in the construction management plan, and there's a proposed condition to cover that. In relation to the play space and also open space across the site, that will all be similar to the existing development. We covered by a management company, and it's likely to cover both parts of the site. And then in relation to Councillor Malloy's query in relation to the access for construction, the intention is just to sort of clear vegetation back to the sort of footpath, the edge of the adopted highway, which you would want to do in any event. Just finally, we fully support the Planning Officer's recommendations for approval as detailed within the committee report before you today, and we thank the council officers, especially in planning and highways, who have worked positively with us throughout the determination process. And we've also held additional public consultations to ensure that we've listened to local residents' concerns and have sought to address their material planning concerns where possible. The proposed development will deliver significant Section 106 contributions, and all 20 of the proposed bungalows will be secured as affordable housing. As the proposal fully accords with all relevant planning policy, we respectfully request that members approve the application before them today as recommended by the Planning Officer. If members have any queries, we'd be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Steve, do you want to come back with anything?
If I may, just a few detailed points. I won't go through a lot. In terms of Councillor Madison's concerns about the drainage, there is a very detailed drainage scheme that overlaps into the ecology scheme for this, and it includes. It's nice to say for a change all elements of the required sustainable drainage network. It's got permeable drives. It's got suds along streets, and it's got suds basins trying to replicate natural drainage features and mechanisms. It's also, there's been a particular point, and it's reflected in the condition along the edge of Page Grove for extra filtration along there. But as I said, a lot of the drainage comes from the existing estate in the direction of the site in the wet woodland. Drainage engineers are satisfied that both in terms of the high level requirements for sustainable drainage and the mechanisms and the volumes and the runoff rates and the tolerances for significant 1 in 100 year floods are all met by this development. The coal interests on the site were mentioned. There was a late representation from the Coal Authority who raised no objection to the proposals. You'll note there's a precautionary condition to validate, I think there's a coal entry on the site, to validate the mitigation that goes on there. Northumbrian Water are effectively the foul drainage authority on this, so they reference the surface water drainage, but effectively handed responsibility over to that to the council, who are the local lead flood authority. Just need to mention in passing that it's an often misused term. The site is not green belt. It might be green field, but it's not green belt. That's a very specific planning designation. But in terms of designations of site and allocations, the county plan sets out to try and direct development to preferred allocated sites. But within policy 6 and 10, it also includes provision for assessing development on unallocated land. And that's the assessment we've got today. It's not against the county plan, it's just got to be assessed against the policy, particularly policy 6, which sets out the criteria for going about looking at those sites that weren't allocated, but that might be suitable for development, looked on one by one. That's the situation. Your decision-making process is in today. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Now, do we have any questions from members from today's speakers? Alan and then Mike, you have questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just in relation to the maintenance and upkeep of the, I guess it's for the green areas, and I'm not sure if the paths and roads are going to be adopted in there. Just looking for clarification on that. But in relation to the upkeep, the maintenance, will that carry a cap? Because I know on other sites sort of throughout the county it becomes a contentious issue where such fees are not capped. Just as a question if that would be something that would be in place.
Thank you for the question. So we'll be appointing a third-party management company to deal with obviously with the management, and then they will obviously apply the costs for the upkeep of all the shared spaces. I can't say that there'll be a cap, but there's always an assessment on affordability when any of these developments come forward. So that is carefully managed. Otherwise, we as sellers of homes or working with our housing association partners, there's just no interest if we can't keep that level to an affordable limit.
Thank you. Mike, you had a question, please. Mike Curry.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask the planning officer, you mentioned at the start of the presentation, I think, about the SLAR for the Gleeson site, that this site wouldn't have been considered without the Gleeson site being built on appeal. Is that correct, my understanding?
Yes, effectively when the county plan was there, both the Gleeson site and this one were not considered acceptable. With the Gleeson site effectively projecting out past it, there is some logic in terms of the layout of the settlement, and that's effectively with some of the first criteria of policy 6 in terms of how it relates to the existing settlement is how this one has sort of been brought round. The other criticism of the SLAR assessment was the likely site access through that wet woodland, and obviously that's been an alternate mechanism to access the site's been found for that as well. So without the Gleeson's development, I think I'd be coming to different conclusions potentially, but we've got to look at what's on the ground.
But I also ask, is there any more land in the county plan adjacent to Spennymoor for development?
I think the allocated sites tend to be within the settlement. After that, it's policy 6, developers come and ask us about a site, and if they're going about it the right way, they'll come through pre-application process and allow us to tell them what our reaction to it's going to be. I don't really have an answer for that. It depends on landowners, land availability, and where developers think there's going to be an opportunity effectively for development.
But in our county plan, is there any more land for development adjacent to Spennymoor?
Can you give me a quick look, and I'll just have a look at the plan off the top of my head.
Good question, Mike. It's stumped them, hasn't it? Does anybody else, while we're waiting for that answer, have any question? Jonathan Elmer.
Thank you, Chair. My initial concerns in relation to this also connect in with the quantity of houses being proposed here, because it's windfall application, essentially. As the officers explained, it's not something that's emerged from the SLAR process. So that process is all about looking at the need of Spennymoor for housing, both in terms of the quantity of housing, but also the different types of housing. But I'm really thinking about the quantity here. And the question is, how will this impact on that issue? I mean, is Spennymoor already over-provided? Is there a demand for more homes? Or is it going to have an impact on subsequent development because it's, if you like, an unscheduled development?
This isn't Farmer Man. I can only do one thing at a time.
Yeah, that's sort of backlog now.
I'll keep looking at the plan in the background, and I'll keep trying to come back to the other one. I mean, the county plan is effectively there to allow for windfall sites to be assessed on their merits as they come up. Spennymoor, we acknowledge, is subject to particularly development pressure at the moment. But ultimately, we've got to look at the effect on the settlement, but a national imperative to find places for housing and affordable housing. We have to maintain a 5-year housing land supply, as you'll know, and that currently is in a reasonably healthy position. But the problem is when we get to below that 5-year housing land supply, we start having to accept things that we're not comfortable with. So just because we're sort of in positive equity with that's not something to be complacent about. It's something we need to achieve. But ultimately, both the provision of housing in principle and the provision of affordable housing in particular is a good thing. And in terms of the provision of affordable housing, again, we've got targets for that. And as a council, I don't think we go anywhere near meeting them. It's got to be down to whether this site on its merits is acceptable or not. That acceptable or not, and part of some of those caveats and the criteria in Policy 6 do look at, does it have an acceptable effect on residential amenity or the drainage or the character of the settlement or highway safety? All of those basic requirements of good development and sustainable development, the relationship to existing facilities are not, are in there. I mean, one of the problems with the site as envisaged in the SHLA, with the access onto Whitworth Road, and as first submitted was with that single access going onto Whitworth Road, that put the walking distances and the connections to bus stops and the like beyond the levels, the 800 metres that we're comfortable with, and it was getting to the point where large elements of the site weren't sustainable. This connection, and both in terms of the vehicle connection into the existing development and those footpath connections, sort of bring that sustainability back round and include that, improve that sort of connection to the settlement as opposed to something just being wedged onto the edge of it. And that's what we don't want as a planning department and as a council, is developments which just exist next to existing settlements and are not part of them. We feel this one does integrate quite well with the, in terms of functionality through the existing estate to the existing estate, although there are elements of that in terms of the use of facilities and the like, which we do need to assess. I am still trying with the map.
Chair, Chair, thank you. Just to add to what Steve's just referenced there, I mean, in terms of Councillor Carrar's question, in terms of the quantity of new housing for Spennymoor, as members might recall, there's been planning permissions recently granted for the former Thorn Electrolux site to the south of the town. That's getting built out at present. I think from memory there's about another phase of development to come on that. There's a planning permission being recently granted to living homes for the former dog track, again to the south of the town. The County Development Plan provides two main allocations for the settlement, the Tudor Grange Lower and the Tudor Grange Upper School, with a predicted yield, combined yield of around about 200 dwellings. Now, and as is often the case, one of those sites has fallen away because internally we to our education department, following adoption of the plan, took a decision to actually rebuild a school on one of those sites. So as a result, I think it could be argued that the town has got a lesser amount of housing likely to come forward through the specific allocations in the plan. I think as Steve's set out there, I mean, Policy 6, it is a permissive policy, and again, some members might remember this debate at the time the plan was adopted a few years ago in terms of the planning inspector's concern that originally the policy was deemed to be too tight. And as a result of that, some concerns that we wouldn't be able to deliver the amount of housing required by our local housing needs assessment. I think, you know, Steve said out, I think there is confidence that the policy does that the proposals do comply with the wording of Policy 6. In terms of the concern about, you know, potential future housing growth in the town, again, as Steve said out, we can never prejudge where landowners or developers are likely to come forward with additional schemes. However, I'm confident, from my knowledge of the work that the department's doing, I think it's fair to say we don't have any more active housing proposals on the table at present for the town. And again, members, I've no doubt will remember earlier on, around about a year ago, where we had the housing application for the Durham Gate site, just to the east of the town, on employment land, which members rejected. So again, I think on balance, I think we've got a proposal here which complies with the criteria set out in Policy 6, but I think, and prejudging the spirit of the question, Councillor Carr, I don't think it opens the coach and horses to go further north and further west. I think Steve said out before, I think the decision to allow the Gleeson site just to the west of the site, I think that does change the planning landscape in terms of how planners have assessed this site. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
I was just wanting to confirm that process, really. So if I'm hearing you right, there is still one site in the Durham plan that hasn't been developed yet near Tudor, is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
How many houses is that?
Looking at the estimated yield in the plan, that will be somewhere around about 90 to 100 units.
So there's still, yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for picking that up. I should have realised at this end of the table we're all male and we can't multitask. So, if there's no further questions, we'll go straight into the debate. Simon Wilson, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just move over here. Simon Wilson, Sacriston Division. Just in terms of actually looking at this, obviously, like anything, I think it's something I repeat a lot, is obviously it's a balancing act in terms of this plan, and we have to work out what the benefits are. I've noticed within this there's no specific landscape value being given to it, but within our own paragraph 190 that it said that actually this would better edge the end of the settlement. Am I correct in reading that? That it basically says that within that it would provide rather than the Gleeson's site, this would actually create a better edge to the settlement in terms of that. And obviously with the change of the boundaries slightly through this new Gleeson's development, it would create a better relationship. I think I understand what the local councillors are saying, however, and that there was issues last year or with the current year of intake, but our strategic education provision has turned around and said that they don't see concerns around, or that certainly they're not seeing major concerns around acceptance into schools in the area, which I think kind of looks at that. Again, flooding standards met. The 106 money that's in there, I understand obviously the NHS is under strain everywhere, but there's significant 106 in line with what the NHS have requested. There's also significant amounts in there. If my maths is right, it's over $500,000 for a variety of what would be in there in terms of 106, alongside affordable housing in the site and bungalows. To me, that would make it, if you've got an area now where it's not classed as being as bad an incursion into the area, what you're actually going to get here is a pretty good site by my reckoning, and as long as that the construction management plan is strong, and there's no issues around the highways with that either, I'd be quite happy to move acceptance of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Simon. David Boyes, please.
Thank you, Chair. David Boyes, representing Easington. I'm always concerned when Policy 6 comes up, because to me, we had the plan refused by the plan inspector about 10 years ago, as people know, and that was a speculative developer's dream. In over my area, we've got about 2,000 houses built onto Easton Village, which is a 10th century settlement, and it's just changing the whole complexion of the place. Now, when I see that this is going into farmland, the fact that it's added on to another estate which has just been accepted, it wouldn't have been if that estate hadn't have been accepted back in a few years ago. I think my other concern is the highways. In my other life as a drive trainer, I go up Pagebank and Whitworth Road a lot, and the planning officer accepted that there are real issues in terms of coming from a 60 road onto a 40 road, onto a 30 road. I know there's a chicane a little bit further up, which does calm things coming from Spennymoor, but coming up from the new Branspeth way, that is a serious road. I think just a cursory look when, in my drive train experience over the last few months, I think there was 2 people died last July in a traffic accident. There was 4 people hospitalised in November coming up that road. I've got serious concerns. This is notwithstanding this possible development of highways issues coming up to this particular site. And I think that, and on policy 6, it does say that it's not prejudicial to highway safety. Now, I've got real concerns about highway safety on this particular development, so to me, it doesn't accord with policy 6. So I'm afraid I don't think I can support this. I think we are changing the whole complexion of settlements. As I say, my settlement's been changed completely, and that's not the planning officer's fault. That's because the plan wasn't accepted by the inspector. But looking at that land, I think you could probably get another 2,000-3,000 houses on top of that if we would like to start to develop on top of those sites as well. So I'm afraid I just can't support this scheme.
Thank you, David. Before we move on, can I ask Highways Phil to come in, please, and just add to what's been mentioned?
I'll just say, Chair, clearly the report sets out the fact that originally the access was proposed for Whitworth Road, but we couldn't get what we considered to be a safe access, which is why the amended scheme comes to Almond Close. So it would only be the construction traffic which would be served from Whitworth Road. Now, clearly that can be heavily controlled through temporary traffic management measures, which a permanent access couldn't be. So that is why we are content that the construction traffic can use Whitworth Road with a left-in, left-out arrangement.
Thank you, Phil. Jonathan, it's you next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back on the point that's just been made by the Highways Officer. Appreciate that the access is no longer on Whitworth Road, but the fact that you're putting in all of those new houses obviously still is going to increase the quantity of traffic going up and down Whitworth Road. So it does create an implication. How can it not? And I'm also, I have to say, a bit concerned about the fact that neither this development nor the adjacent development have actually been plan-led. And one has justified the other. So where does that end? But I've got some more specific issues that I want to raise as well. First of all, in relation to the ecology side of things, I note that it was raised by the ecologists that there's a high likelihood that there'll be ground nesting, potentially valuable birds on the site, but that no bird survey has done. So a little bit concerned about that. I'd like to ask the question specifically whether a bat survey has been done, because the wet woodland band up the northeast boundary of the site is undoubtedly going to be valuable for bats commuting. Concerned about the loss of wet woodland associated with the construction of the entrance, whether that construction of an entrance actually results in the loss of any of the wet woodland habitat, because it's also on the Whitworth Road side boundary. And also the fact that there's a proposal to keep that area wet by the use of a SUDS scheme, which is great in theory, but what we also find is that after a development's been built, people then over a period of time, plumb in their washing machines and sinks into the wrong place. That goes into the surface water drainage system. So in this scenario, would end up in the SUDS system and into that wet woodland. So what protections are there in place to make sure that that sort of thing doesn't happen? It's really hard to protect against that. I've got a concern, so also in relation to the landscape officers, who've raised an issue in relation to the northern boundary treatment. I would just ask a question, why on earth is it not possible to improve the treatment of that boundary to the standard that the landscape officers are actually requesting? Where's the constraint there? Why can't that be improved? Also, in terms of what the councillors have said and residents as well, I share their concerns in relation to the fact that all of that new traffic generated by the estate is now going to penetrate between the two existing estates, and whether or not you're going to get people just trying to get home, whizzing through those estates to get to their drive, whether there's any highways mechanism that can be used to calm that traffic. Yeah, and again, a resident raised the issue in relation to the a planning condition from the early 2000s in relation to a footpath being created along that existing woodland boundary. What's the issue there? Why is that going to be lost? Why is that no longer possible to take that forwards? Thank you.
I'll try and pick up all those, but if I miss something, please let me know. I mean, there were sufficient surveys done to inform the county ecologists' assessment of this, albeit that at the time the report was written, the negotiations on some of those elements were still underway. So there was a caveat to that in the report. But in terms of the bird surveys that were required, the bat's potential use of the wet woodland, and obviously the bat surveys do look at transits, particularly along hedgerows and where they're feeding. But the main protection is obviously their roosts, and those very mature trees in the wet woodland are both highly likely to contain bats, but also not directly affected by the development in terms of physical works to them. You're right to bring up the extent of the access for the construction management plan. That will have to be agreed in detail. There is a little bit of tolerance where the woodland is very narrow, right at the sort of the point of that triangle. It sort of develops out into where the ponds were shown on the photographs. But the sort of visibility displays that would be required for a full-on residential estate compared to what's required for this left-only exit for the construction traffic, where in terms of you would need the longer visibility cord to look left if you were turning across and into that traffic, if you were turning right. So in terms of the dimensions of the visibility display and the access that's required for construction traffic, that's far less because of this left-in, left-out arrangement, and that absolutely minimises the effect on the wet woodland and any intrusion into that. Like I say, it does taper off where it's near the existing farm access. In terms of the grey water, the washing machines and the like, that will go into the public sewerage system. It's not part of the sustainable drainage system. And if the development's constructed correctly, and there's no reason to think it shouldn't be, that won't go into the surface water arrangements and end up in the suds ponds. The suds ponds, the swales, the permeable drives are there to manage surface water. And the last thing we want is water with chemicals in it going into the ponds near the high value ecology asset on that part of the site. So the two elements, the Northumbrian water side and the lead flood authority side of the foul and grey and the surface water, I think as a matter of course should separate that concern out from the surface water drainage. In terms of the depth of the planting, there's an easy answer to that. And that you can get as wide a buffer in as you want, but that will mean less houses. And there's a point at which developers want so many houses, whether it's for viability, whether it's for the agreements with registered social landlords, and they've set out the stall effectively to make the development better than the one next door in terms of what the planning inspectors approved. It's an improvement on what was there before. Effectively, on the site visit yesterday, we saw that there's a agricultural hedge down now with a very large gap in it. There's a gap required for one of the easements, but the gap will be significantly closed. And effectively, that betterment is such that both in terms of the landscape harm is reduced, that assessment, when you're on site, that the hedge is very much, the site is very much a plateau, and then the land falls down from there towards the farmland, towards the Auckland Way. And then on the other side of the Auckland Way, the land is actually designated as of high landscape value, and there's some designated parkland around there, around the old Whitworth Hall Hotel. The topography effectively gives a logic as well as that two-dimensional relationship to the settlement you can see there, and Councillor Currer's concerns about the endless spread of development after development. I think in terms of a logical stop to the settlement, that three-dimensional topography works with that. The buffer is strong enough to provide that at the moment, but as ever, just as there were some little gaps left in the Leicester Estate, the fact that an estate road goes round the edge of this, and you'll know you'll never get a planner to give you a yes or no answer on anything. There's always a caveat. We can never say no, there will not be pressure to develop there. But in terms of the landform and how the settlement is rounding off at the moment, this does feel like a defensible stop. And I think the extent of landscaping that's been improved and provided here, I think accentuates that stop. And in terms of being defensible at this point in time, I think that's where we're at. In terms of the traffic through, yes, there'll be more traffic in the general area, even if traffic is not directly going out onto Whitworth Lane. And as I mentioned in my presentation, the sort of hierarchy that Phil and his colleagues go through for the transport assessment don't just look at the immediate effects, but the effects on the wider transport network and all the connections in the area, whether it's the big roundabouts on the 688 or whether it's the end of the Whitworth Lane where it goes to the T-junction at Bransworth and then across to Scripton Gill Road. The nature of those roads in terms of the traffic calming on those is such that we can't support them as an access. And mentioning traffic calming, obviously the photographs showed that there are tables and traffic calming devices through that estate at the moment. It's designed to be the width of a bus route potentially, but it's also got large tables on it which slowed the site bus down yesterday. He tiptoed over it. There is traffic calming there, and if more was required, Phil's team would have asked for it. In terms of the parking as well, the existing parking problems, it's not for a new development to solve the problems of an existing development, but there's always the capability of traffic orders and double yellow lines to try and control those things where there's unexpected parking. If the residents of the existing estate are all parking at this estate entrance, it sounds like there's mechanisms being investigated to try and control that. In the last point, I don't know the legal agreement in detail, but just as there will be legal agreements for this application to say you've got to look after your wildlife, you've got to keep maintenance of these areas for a certain number of years, you've got to keep footpaths open. There will have been a legal agreement on the footpath that we walked on yesterday that goes along the edge next to the bund of the existing estate to make sure it stays in place and is properly maintained. The fact that we're looking to build over this as part of this development, if you approve it, sort of resets that. Part of it falls away, but just as the legal agreements for that development will have required that the landscaping to be maintained and these days sort of monitored as well, the biodiversity improvement will have taken into account that there was necessary potentially tree loss to access this at the estate entrance, and that will have to be offset and taken into account in the biodiversity net gain calculation that there's tree loss here. It will have to be mitigated and provided somewhere else. I hope that answers your questions, but I'll have to come back on anything.
It really does, but it also creates a little bit of concern in terms of the longevity of any sort of planning legal agreement. If there can just be, another application coming along in the future can simply override everything that's been previously agreed.
There can be overridden, but because there's a requirement for biodiversity net gain, there's got to be an offset and an improvement on this. As I mentioned, this one sits on the old regulations where the biodiversity net gain is fairly minimal, but is in the positive. It's like conveyances. If it's a legal agreement, there is always the potential for those to be renegotiated, but it's a formal process to go through.
Chair, sorry, can I just add to, I think a bit of the debate today has been about the scale and the size of the settlement, and just picking up on Councillor Boyce's fair point before about how approval of this site, you know, are concerned that might lead to hundreds, if not thousands, of further sites coming forward to the north. I mean, just really, and Steve's right, it's very difficult to give a yes or no as members know, because planning applications do come in and we have to assess them on the merits. But just familiarising myself with the wording of Policy 6 here, you know, just to give some assurance to members, hopefully, that it's not an open door policy. You know, there are checks and balances in there. And one of the fundamentals is a site has to be adjacent to a settlement and well related. And when we sit down as planners and look at what falls within the well related category, you know, we're looking at developments which are well related to public transport and well related to a range of facilities within a town. And in my judgment, anything proposed further to the north here it would be highly unlikely to receive support under Policy 6, because you'd be way outside of the normal accepted maximum walking distances to bus services, to schools and shops. And that's, you know, that's part of the challenge that Steve and the team have been working through with this site, you know, in terms of how that relates to the settlement. And I think, you know, I think on balance, we think we've got something here that does work, that does fit within the confines of Policy 6, but certainly just picking up on the point before, Councillor Boyce, you know, I think we can give a high degree of assurance that if members were minded to approve this site today, it wouldn't open the floodgates to all those fields to the north, because they would fall foul of the, you know, the checks and balances within Policy 6.
You gentlemen, that's eaten up a lot of time. Kevin, you've had to wait a long while, and then Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I've almost forgotten what it was I was going to say. I've listened carefully to the local members concerning regards the concerns of flooding and highway safety. I think the flooding and drainage issues are being clarified and addressed in paragraphs 205 and 208, and also by the officers themselves. I think the highway safety issues have also been covered, and I think it's acceptable the response that we receive from the officers themselves. It's always interesting when we put a housing development forward, we always get the issues raised in regard to the NHS services. I mean, obviously this is a national problem, it requires a national solution. It cannot be addressed or covered within a specific housing application. Everybody's got a chance to influence those issues being addressed or not in due course as we move towards a national election. Just getting on the application itself, 3-4 years ago, as a former portfolio holder for housing, I'm acutely aware that the council has a considerable problem in delivering and meeting its housing need. We are in the middle of a national housing crisis, and those outstanding needs are really profound. It seems that every development that comes before planning, I'm always making the same points in our need to deliver more homes, more affordable homes, with which what can be developed. I think everybody understands this need, but not necessarily want it to be delivered where they live. The scheme itself, just picking up on what Simon raised, I think it's a well thought out scheme. The agreement's approved a considerable £277,000 green infrastructure funding, £300,000 off-site play space, £90,000 for healthcare provision, 187 homes have been reduced from 215. So it has been, you know, considered in regards to the saturation on the site itself. And also provides a good mixture of tenure. And very importantly, we've got a massive outstanding need that we really need to get a grip of this mind for bungalows as we move forwards, and the population of the county is aging. And also I think the delivery of the much needed affordable housing which is being provided is again commendable. We haven't had a seconder to Simon's proposal to accept the officer's recommendation for approval, but I would like to second that.
Thank you for that, Kevin. Mike Kerr, please.
Thanks, Chair. This is quite a similar development to the one that was recently approved for Crook, whereby it built on open green land into the countryside, and it was a similar process where the residents and the elected members opposed it. That was in the County Durham plan, so that was one of the big supporting factors to that development. This development is in the County Durham plan, and to build on what Councillor Boyce said, I'm not comfortable with the way that you get one adjacent property and then you get another one, and it seems strange that we're not build. If we have got a problem with housing, then we should build out on the County Durham plan dedicated sites, allocated sites. I'd also make the complaints from the residents in this one are very similar to the ones in Crook. Also, the loss of amenity, the traffic, the lack of facilities in the town to cope with increased population. I'd also highlight that certainly I see that the affordable property in the town centres gets driven down in price. People are less likely to live in the terraced houses in the town centre, and I've seen that both in Crook and Spenny in terms of house prices. I know it's not the planner's fault, and I think the planners have answered the questions very professionally and done a great job. I just think that overall it's difficult, a difficult process for residents when by no one wants the development, but it goes ahead because of X, Y, and Z. And it's a bit of a classic process from the developer, whereby you propose a high number of houses, then you reduce it, then you add a few bungalows in and a few affordable properties to help with the planning criteria. So I would like to propose that I would oppose this development on those grounds. Looking for a seconder if anyone's interested.
I would second that, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. So that's proposed and seconded. Does anyone else wish to speak? Alan, you want to come back, and then Sam. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It is a most difficult one, definitely is, and not taking into account what both the local members and the residents are saying here. I think every time everything what's been raised in relation to the planning concerns, both Stephen Reid and Steve Franz have answered those concerns for myself. The highways is a big one. I did do the site visit yesterday, and I think had the original sort of application where it had the access, where the traffic access is going to be, it wouldn't have a leg to stand on. But bringing and it's far from ideal, bringing in the access through the housing estate, it's probably, it's not ideal at all, bringing all that traffic through the estate. But unfortunately, from a planning point of view, it ticks all the boxes, as the highways engineers said there. So I'm really quite on the fence, but it is more than difficult to go against it, I have to say. A couple of things I just wanted to ask on there. One was which I think was Pete had mentioned, was the play area. Could be tightened, if it was to be approved, could we tighten that up in relation to, it didn't seem to be, the shared play area for the Gleeson side. That wasn't confirmed whether that would be acceptable or wasn't in relation with Gleeson accept, as regarding the upkeep, the maintenance of it. Ideally, would have been for this size of scheme, would have been to see us on-site play area. But again, unfortunately, I couldn't see any big enough green space left within the site to put such a play area in. But it would have been ideal to have that in. The special education, the SENS, did I read that right, Steve, in relation to that's not compatible at the moment because that policy hasn't come in? And if it hasn't, was there not an inkling from the developer to make such a sort of volunteer, such a contribution? Because as there is concerns, although the schools have said that they can fit with the numbers and everything, but as the local members said, there is concerns that they can't as well. So particularly on the SEND places, if there'd been a voluntary contribution, then I'm sure that would have been much accepted. And one for Phil was for the highways was the roads and paths are there to be adopted after completion. And the temporary access is temporary, but I didn't see anywhere in there unless it's in the management plan. Is there a time scale on that in relation when it will be closed and you know, for the use to be stopped? And also in that management plan, have they got in relation to keeping the roads clean, supers going over it every day, a few times a day, stop the mud on the roads? Yeah, and that was basically it from me. Thank you.
The approach to the play provision is our standard one, in that this is not directed particularly at that adjacent play area. There are monies available if people want for capital use rather than for maintenance and the like. If people want to improve facilities, this all gets a little bit harder. Once upon a time, the local authority managed all the green areas and the play areas, and we got money in and we improved them. And these days, most estates have management and maintenance companies to do that. There's no reason in principle why you know, a facility like this can't be expanded and improved as part of those monies. There's a process to go through, managed by Mr. Reid here, who with councillors looks at these things. But the consultation with the leisure people was comfortable that effectively the distance to this formal play provision was appropriate for the residents in terms of likely walking distance of young families. They'll look at it as we do without relation to the maintenance of the land ownership, like just the functional use of it, and it's well located in relation to this, and it was something we sought to connect through on the redesigns of this. So the monies would be secured, they would be available to upgrade facilities, but they wouldn't be there to offset maintenance implications. There is a lot of detail in the construction management plan to answer your last point, and to skip over, I'll hand over to Phil for any detail on the highways. There's specific location down to the detail of wheel washing facilities for, you know, keeping mud off the road. There will be standard operating hours for this. And one of the things that the developers pointed out is that the nature of their operation effectively as I mentioned earlier, this is only part of this is being secured as affordable housing, but this is, it's, you know, there's a much greater affordable offer across this scheme. And because of the nature of affordable developments, they're not building a house, then selling it, and that extends the build process down to the market. They have much shorter build processes, so I'm going to guess at it. It's in the report, but I think it was 180 weeks is the likely build out, which is a lot less than it would be for a market housing development on this. So the basic answer to questions is yes, there are detailed ties in the construction management plan for, you know, both the dust management and the mud management for local residents, back gardens, and for going onto the roads. And it's all in there. Phil will no doubt answer the detailed on the highways, but to repeat, you know, there was clear traffic management all the way into the site yesterday as the bus took us through.
Yeah, just to answer your question regarding the adoption, the applicant has indicated that they want the roads and footways to be adopted, so clearly it's a separate process, the Section 38 process, but all the internal infrastructure, roads and footways have been proposed to be to adoptable standard.
And just to send contribution, Steve, is that?
The report sets out where we are legally at the moment. If the developer wanted to offer it, that would be taken into account. But as the application stands at the moment, we have no way to insist on it.
Yes, I've got you down, but Sam, you're next, please. Sam's there.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in a mind to agree with David regarding Whitworth Road. I know the road very well. There have been numerous accidents over many, many years and fatalities. I'm not here to stop development and housing. I get all that. But that the correct housing has got to be in the correct place also. And I feel as if this development, where it is situated, if there may be a stop on the development of where it is, and it joins up with the other development. But if this goes ahead and this development will be, when it is up and running, it won't put a stop on many road users using Whitworth Road. And I couldn't live with myself, basically, if I went along and approved this development solely only on road safety and the volume of traffic that may go along Whitworth Road. So I won't be supporting this development.
If I could just come back on that, obviously we take highway safety very, very, it's one of the main things we consider at the outset of the process. And I think actually that's evidenced in this case by the fact that the first iteration of this, which was directly accessing and egressing off Whitworth Road, we said we would refuse. It couldn't be supported. We went through a number of iterations of the signs, lines and street calming. But we've got to look at quite how our technical colleagues go through this in terms of the assessment of traffic volumes and times of day. And you know, I've been doing this here long enough to remember the horrible old bridge at the bottom of Page Bank where with all the paint scuffed on the bollards at the side of it, and the new bridge that's gone through after that. So I'm very aware of the road. But that, to repeat myself on what I said before, you know, Highways have done a strategic assessment on this. There is a line in the sand where we say, no, the volume of traffic, the nature of traffic, the speed of traffic isn't accessible. And the caveat of that is, if you're wanting to refuse on that, we've got to have some evidence to show why that isn't acceptable in highway terms, notwithstanding that at appeal, what a developer will do is they will point to my report, they will point to Phil Harrison's report and say, well, your assessment says this is fine. Where's the evidence that this is not acceptable? Sometimes there's elements of judgments, but ultimately this is a technical process and one that has been gone through in detail on this. A line in the sand has been drawn, they've found an alternative. This wasn't acceptable in highways terms. Technically, it is now. And if you are considering a refusal on highways grounds, I think you need to think about it carefully, is my advice.
Thank you. I never like to say that one brought in at any point. So, Kevin, you're next on the list, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to come back on a point that was raised by my colleague here in regards to this development putting extra demands on Spennymoor itself. I mean, we're all aware that Spennymoor has just recently received £20 million worth of funding to drive forward the regeneration of the town. And, you know, this is another cog in the wheel, if you like. You know, I really can't understand why that sort of argument would be put forward when we're actually moving forward at a pace here.
Thank you, yes. Jonathan, please. Try and keep it short. We've used
it is a short one, Chair. Just wanted to make the point that on paragraphs 109 and 120 of the report, so 109 energy, there's been no response from the internal consultee, and 120 travel, no response. Is that usual?
Unfortunately, yes.
Good, that answers your question. Simon.
To be fair, my point was actually going to be around what Steve dealt with around Whitworth Road and using that as any sort of, like, what strength would actually be applied to that on a legal point of view if that was to be the reason for doing it, because to me that would be a little bit weak, given that it's not given the consideration that's been given in the report.
Thank you. Oh, Neil wants to chip in now.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this brief. So clearly we've had a motion to approve, which has been seconded, and equally a motion to refuse that's also been seconded. I think what I'd suggest to the Chair is that we take the motion to approve first, see where we get to on that. If that's voted down, I will need to come back to Councillor Curran in particular in terms of the reasons that have been advanced for refusal. Just before we get to that, for clarification, can I just check with the planning officer? He did give an update at the start of his presentation about the need for a Section 39 agreement, which would be secured through the 106 obligation. I think there might be some knock-on consequences for condition 12 that's set out in his report. I would suggest that we probably don't need condition 12, but if I could just pass over to the planning officer on that, we'll have that clarified, and then perhaps we can go to the vote.
Absolutely. Very briefly, if we get a Section 39 agreement in the legal agreement, then effectively condition 12 falls away. We can get the detail through the legal agreement instead. If it's minded to approve, I'd ask for that to be part of the approval, please.
David.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So, just from what you're saying, Steve, you're saying there's no way we'd be able to go with this on highways because if it went to appeal, we would lose it anyway. Added to that, what Stephen Reid said, that it's very, very unlikely, given the situ of the land and how accessibility to transport, that there is going to be any other development on top of that. I know you can't give a cast iron guarantee, but very, very unlikely. And I respect your views. I think I'd like to withdraw my objection because if we can't get it on highways, and I've got to accept what the planning manager says, that it's very unlikely there's going to be any further incursions into the countryside, and that I'll withdraw my objection.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to say anything? Sam? You've never let me forget. I missed you one time. Have you anything further to add? Thank you. Okay, we'll go over to the vote then, and we'll take first the officer's recommendation for approval. All those in favour? All those against? All those abstention? One.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So that motion to approve has been lost on 6 votes to 5, 1 abstention. Clearly, there's a rival motion that was advanced by Councillor Curra for refusal. I think I would like to understand in more detail the reasons that are being put forward. To begin with, I think he was particularly concerned that this wasn't an allocation in the plan. As has been said numerous times today already, there is a windfall policy. It's policy 6. The officers clearly assessed it as acceptable against that policy. So whether you agree or disagree with that assessment, I don't think the issue of the lack of allocation in the plan would be a sustainable reason for refusal. The other reasons that I heard were all to do with traffic, highway safety, lack of facilities in the town, and a perceived knock-on effect in terms of town centre house prices. Clearly, the latter isn't a material consideration. I've not heard any sort of evidence that would back up the concerns that have been expressed, sort of anecdotally, if you like, on the highway safety impacts. You know, clearly we've heard technical evidence from the expert officers about why the access arrangement that's now proposed is acceptable in highway safety terms. We've heard about the number of traffic movements which have been assessed to be acceptable. So at the moment, I'm struggling to see any reasons which would be sustainable on appeal, if that's where we got to.
Yes, I'm no planning expert, so you've put me on the spot there. Is there any issue around the loss of amenity to residents adjacent to the property?
No, or not in my estimation. The boundary, for the most part, is formed of the bund which separates the existing estate at its western extent from the existing development. That tree belt which is out with the site, and then the properties in Page Grove, which are one two-storey property which is at an angle, and then some bungalows which face across this towards the site. Those boundaries at the moment have low boundary treatments because they're enjoying a view of a countryside. But the council's residential amenity guidance effectively sets out separation distances you need to achieve for reasonable expectations of amenity. As I mentioned before, the distances proposed exceed 20 metres, and the required distance from a living room window to a two-storey gable is usually 13 metres. So in terms of our basic requirements for that, the development meets it and then some. And those distances are usually where you've got back garden to back garden. And obviously, you know, we've got a bit of a landscaping strip in between the back gardens of Page Grove and the proposed dwellings. So residential amenity in terms of the physical relationships, if that was your question, is acceptable. There are other aspects of residential amenity in relation to other aspects, whether it's from the construction process or passing traffic, and which particular aspect of residential amenity, was it that basic one or something different?
It was the basic one. I don't have a specific planning reason to object. I just find I'm very uncomfortable with the fact that there are houses. There's plots in Spennymoor that are in the Durham plan that aren't being built on first, and I'm still not absolutely convinced that the town wouldn't continue to creep that direction. So you can't give a definitive answer to say that it definitely won't. Whether that creates a problem legally, I don't know. If any other members would like to support or help me out here, but I can't answer from a legal standpoint. Apologies.
Chair, I am concerned that on sort of Councillor Currer's own case, if you like, he said that he's not offering any specific planning reason. Clearly, you know, we can hear what other members have to say in terms of that, but my advice at the moment is I haven't heard anything that's been offered up by reason. Sorry, I haven't heard anything that's been offered up that constitutes a sustainable reason for refusal.
Sorry, did you want to say something then, Simon?
I did, yeah, just a quick point. Obviously, the adjacent Gleeson's development was also considered unacceptable in terms of Policy 6, but obviously went through on appeal. So I think a big concern is that though our planners may feel that, you know, the position they'll adopt in the future is to reject this sort of speculative development that juts out into the countryside, isn't well related to the settlement, that, as we've had evidence, could be overturned at appeal. And that could happen again, of course. So that's, I guess, an issue. And looking at Policy 6, there is one line within it that basically says that this sort of speculative development needs to be suited in terms of its scale as well. So maybe planners could just come back on in terms of whether or not you consider the scale of this development to be acceptable.
Yes, I mean it's in terms of its character, and there's a number of dimensions to scale, but in terms of its character, the densities there. One of the pros of the existing estates, as I said, was those green areas that go through the middle of it, and those have been extended through and replicated by degree in this. You know, the layout meets standards now that are required in terms of the garden lengths and the provision of SUDS facilities and the MPPF's requirement for on-street trees that I don't think were requirements when those estates adjacent were built. Neither the Gleeson ones or the ones from 2002. I mean, scale and density and character sort of overlap, and it's, I think, part of this, we can never say never, and we can never say there'll be no more development, but this I think gives a logical and defensible line in terms of the extent of the settlement and current requirements and current pressures. You can see how the Gleeson one juts out, and I think that was a particularly disappointing appeal decision for us because of how that didn't relate to the settlement. But that presents us with, you know, the current situation we've got now, and we've got to work around that and the implications of it. I'm comfortable with the scale of it and those other dimensions of it that I've just mentioned.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've just been refreshing my memory on the narrative with the Gleeson's appeal, and that was, I'm pretty sure that was before the adoption of the County Durham plan. And if memory serves me right, it was in a position where we're struggling to demonstrate a 5-year land supply, and therefore the positive presumption of paragraph 11 of the MPPF was in place, where we had to identify significant harm to prevent further housing encroachment. So I think it's a good point from Councillor Elmer there, but I have to say I think now the County Durham plan's adopted, albeit with Policy 6, which does open up, you know, sustainable sites on the edge of settlements, I think we're in a stronger position to prevent any further encroachment to the north and the west than we were at the time of the Gleeson's appeal. So probably, Chair, I would say not a directly comparable appeal decision, but a good point nonetheless.
Yeah, but this has come forward, hasn't it? Simon, you were getting a bit agitated.
I think, just to be fair, looking at it, I think the hard part is that we can't legislate what's coming in future, and we can't make a decision on this planning application based on what might be in the future of what people might put forward. And as a result, and this is the other side of it as well, is the old thing that we always get here is that we're judging on what we have here, not what might be. So to say we could see a creep or could worry about a creep, well, that's something that's dealt with when that potential creep comes in. And unfortunately, that's how we have to deal with it in planning. I've not heard anything in terms of any legal reasons for why we should turn this down. So I'll happily, if I have to, repropose that we go with the officer's recommendation in line with what the condition that was mentioned before as well being removed due to the Section 39 agreement.
Well, it seems we have to take the vote again to be correct. And you need laugh as well, Craig. It's not that funny. We've arrived at a decision and it's got to be overturned because, well, I go back a long time in planning, more than 20 odd years. And what mattered most was the local members' opinion, both of them, which has just been thrown out the window just on policy alone. But we are where we are. Well, it's a bit out of the ordinary, Pete, but yeah, if you want to have a quick word.
Thank you, Chair. Just clarification. Obviously, on voting for this again, because even though you can't find the planning reasons for oppose it, the first vote, it's lost. So could you just clarify the reason to come back and take another vote? Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Malloy. So as you correctly state, the original motion to approve has been lost. There was a rival motion from Councillor Currow, which was seconded for refusal. I think in light of the exchange that we've had, obviously Councillor Currow will probably need to clarify this, but I'm taking it that he no longer wishes to pursue that now. Clearly, if he does, he can state his reasons and it can be put to the vote. But if he doesn't, then the alternative position is as Councillor Wilson's moved. So he's moved for it to be put to the vote again on approval. He will need a seconder for that before it's put, but there's nothing to stop a further motion for approval being put forward.
Yeah, just to clarify, I don't have a legal reason, a policy-based reason for the rejection. I just feel it's the things I've said, basically the objections from local residents and this idea that you can kind of just speculate on the outskirts of Spennymoor without building on the county plan seems very strange to me. Whether that would stand up in a court of law, I don't know.
No, I don't suppose it would. It's a common sense opinion, which I happen to agree with. But we are where we are, much to my disgust, really. So have we to take this vote again?
We need to get a seconder, Chair.
We did get a second. Kevin put his hand up and seconded it, yes. So we go over the same old ground with a mover and a seconder for the officer's recommendation. All those in favour? All those against? Without a valid reason, really. And all those abstaining, which is always the chicken's way out, I feel.
So that's approved, fine. So, Chair, the motion to approve in accordance with the officer recommendation, subject to those tweaks that the officer mentioned around condition 12 and the 39, that's been approved on a vote of 5 to 3.
And I can only apologise to the local members and to the people of Spennymoor who were objecting, because it's not an ideal scenario. It's the first one I've had in my chairmanship, and I would rather not have another. Thank you. That's where we are. Do we need a comfort break before we move on to the next application? 5 minutes, no more, because time's getting on. at Het Moor Farm, Het. And Chris Shields is going to present for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, for the introduction. Yeah, this is the installation and operation of a solar farm together with all associate works, equipment and necessary infrastructure at Het Moor Farm. This is a resubmission of an application that this committee determined in June 2022, where it was refused for landscape reason that I'll get into in a little while and explain what the changes are. So the site's located to the north of the A688 between the Tersdale roundabout and Finford roundabout. The settlement of Het is to the north. You've got Durham Gate and Spennymoor over to the west, and then Tersdale over to the east over here. The Amazon development is just off the plan there. This is the East Coast Main Line to the immediate east of the site. Looking on the aerial photograph, it's slightly out of date here, but it's a good representation of the site. Say you've got the Durham Gate development over to the west, substations on the A688 to the south of the site, the Tersdale roundabout here on the A688, and Finford roundabout here. So Amazon is off to the north of the screen there. This is a view from the A688 just before you get to the substations when you're heading west along that road, and this is looking north across the site on an area that will be developed. You can see the Amazon buildings in the background on there. This is looking immediately west from the Tersdale roundabout, so across the site towards Durham Gate. The fields in the foreground here wouldn't be developed. It's the ones towards the background of this picture where the solar panels would start to be installed. As part of the recommendation on this development, you will read in the report, we'll be expecting additional planting on the edge of this roundabout. So the view here is as if you were in a vehicle on the roundabout, and there'll be additional planting in the foreground to bolster this screening here. And this is on Het Mill Lane, looking southwest across the site. So if we just go back to the aerial, it's from this sort of area here. And onto the proposed site plan. Now at this point I'll just go through some of the changes before. So I said this is a resubmission of the previous application. Now the reason for refusal in 2022 was the local planning authority considers that due to its location, size and form of development, the proposal would result in unacceptable harm to the character, quality and distinctiveness of the landscape and would be in conflict with CDP policies 10 and 39 and part 15 of the NPPF, and is therefore in an inappropriate location with the benefits not outweighing the harm, contrary to CDP policy 33. Now, in order to tackle the reason for refusal, the applicant has removed an area of the solar panels to the southwest of the site. So if we look on the plan here, this area here, which is underneath some of the aerial power cables, that's been removed. There's also an area to the south of the site which is no longer part of development, but to clarify, that was also removed prior to the last application coming to committee. So we've reduced it to the areas you can see with the blue panels on this plan. And in addition to removing those panels, there's been enhanced planting across the site to break up the development and soften the long-range views from the east. So the primary issue that landscape officers raised last time was the views from Quarrington Hill. We don't have that on the plan, but that's to the far east on the other side of the A1M, and that'd be looking across. So you'd have the Amazon buildings in your view there, and you would see them to your right or the north, and then this development would infill the gaps between that and Ferry Hill and Durham Gate beyond. With the additional planting that you can see in green across the site, breaking up the individual fields and particularly around the eastern edge, that would be intended to soften the development and just create more green across the site, essentially. Now, in addition to the physical changes to the site, we've also had some appeal decisions since that decision in 2022. And as has been highlighted in those decisions that were at Merton and Sheraton, both national and local development plan policy recognise that large-scale solar farms may result in some landscape and visual impact harm. However, both adopt a positive approach indicating that development can be approved where the harm is outweighed by the benefits. Planning inspectors have indicated that very significant weight should be afforded to the benefits of solar development. So move on again to the landscape strategy for the site. It's hard to pick out on here, but this is the master plan scheme for it. And as you'll see in the reports, there's an additional condition required to finalise that scheme as the developer's ready. And we'd be consulting our specialist landscape officers on that to make sure we get a good standard of development there. In addition, that will be secured through a Section 39 agreement for the life of the development. So we've had no objections from statutory and internal Durham County Council consultees, subject to conditions where appropriate, with the exception of Croxdale and Het Parish Council, who are of course statutory. Landscape officers have advised that development would cause harm to the character, quality and distinctiveness of the local landscape and to important views from high ground to the east. Similar to the conclusion they reached last time, although it's been tempered more this time with the additional planning that's been put in place. And just to clarify on that point, they have not raised an objection to the development, and this is commensurate with all solar farms. They will always find harm. It's just the degree of that harm and how we balance that against the benefits. The objection received from Croxdale and Het Parish Council cited conflicts with County Durham Plan's conservation goals and national planning policies. Concerns include potential health impacts, loss of green spaces, negligible community benefits, impact to property values, intrusion on the Het conservation area, wildlife disruption, and agricultural land conversion conflicting with national food security goals. Ferry Hill Town Council has raised no objections but requested additional planting, and that was prior to us getting further planting across the site. And would not wish to see soil development south of the A688 road. Of course, as we mentioned, the part of the site that had been on the south of that road was removed as part of this scheme and eventually as part of the previous version of the scheme. We've received 24 representations from the public on the application, 14 objections, 7 support, and 3 neither supporting or objecting. In terms of objection, 14 letters received with issues raised, including landscape harm with inadequate screening, greenbelt infringement. Just clarifying that point, the site is not in the greenbelt. Loss of agricultural land, soil contamination, harm to the conservation area, harm to biodiversity, ineffectiveness of solar in this region, and a preference for alternative green energy sources, such as wind power, etc. Received comments from Boburn and Park Hill Community Partnership, and they stated that the site's proximity to the partnership's boundary suggests potential significant visual impacts, including on the area of high landscape value. Just to reiterate again, the site is not in the area of high landscape value. The Campaign for the Protection of Rural England, or CPRE, has objected to the solar farm due to landscape impact and loss of agricultural land. Requests have also been made to ensure cyclists are protected during construction works and that there be additional mitigation for skylark and curlew. Just to come in on that point, that our ecology officers are now satisfied with the offer that's been put forward on this scheme in terms of bird protection, and there's bird and bat boxes proposed throughout the site. In terms of support, 7 letters received stating that the solar farm would generate enough clean electricity to meet the annual needs of 14,400 households, reducing energy costs and enhancing energy security. It would save over 14,900 tonnes of carbon annually, contributing to climate and environmental goals. Biodiversity net gain would reach 61% for habitats and 86% for hedgerows, including planting 3.6 kilometres of new hedgerows and providing bird nesting areas. The development would generate significant business rates and provide a community benefit fund. We've also received comments or a letter of support from Mary Kelly Foy, MP for the City of Durham. She has supported the application due to Durham County Council's climate emergency declaration and commitment to carbon neutrality by 2045. She advocates for renewable energy projects to address the energy price shocks and reliance on unstable markets, aligning with the UK's net zero target by 2050. So in summary, this resubmission application has been amended in order to address the Council's reason for refusal of the previous scheme, and although there will remain a degree of landscape harm, this harm must be weighed in the planning balance. The development would provide a significant renewable energy source, providing clean energy to over 14,400 homes, reducing dependence on fossil fuel power stations with additional employment benefits, as well as biodiversity and landscape improvements. Whilst it's accepted that the proposed solar farm would have an impact to the landscape, It's considered that the benefits of development in terms of energy supply and security, support for renewable energy, biodiversity enhancement and job creation would outweigh that harm in accordance with CDP Policy 33. The proposals have generated some public interest. Concerns expressed regarding the proposals have been taken into account and carefully balanced against the scheme's wider social, economic and public benefits. All other material considerations have been taken into account in the determination of the solar farm application and have been found to be acceptable. The proposed development is considered broadly accord with the relevant policies of the County Durham Plan and relevant sections of the MPPF.
Thank you, Chris. We have no local members to speak. We'll start with two objectors, Catherine Hodgson and Jean Wood. You'll have 5 minutes between you, 2.5 minutes each. Kirsty will let you know when there's 4 minutes gone and you can swap over whenever you want. Thank you. Is that Catherine going first? Can you, your microphone's not on, are you?
Can you hear me now? I live at the end of the Hetmill Lane, which is the end of the adopted highway, over the level crossing called Hetmill Cottage. There's a few areas which I'd like to draw the attention. Obviously, one's flooding, one's the use of the road, and one to do with the construction of the site itself. The water drainage system flows into the watercourse which flows past our house. The excess water from the building in Integra 61 has caused us damage to both our banksides and land, with a failure to mitigate excess water runoff in construction and operation. We feel this will be the same process again with the construction of the solar farm. We've been surrounded by industrial buildings with the purpose of buying our house to live in a pleasant environment surrounded by countryside. The road down to the construction site and down to our house also has a width restriction in which causes its problems on a daily basis. The road itself, we believe, has been poorly maintained and is poorly operated by all agencies involved. With regard to the flooding, we've received multi-agency denial for all of the problems to do with the flooding, rather with the quantity and quality of the water which comes into the system. This is from Northumbrian Water Authority, Durham County Council and the Environment Agency. I would like to point out that I feel that the letters of support within the report, I feel, are a bit unbiased in the fact that a few of the support letters are actually pre-written and pre-populated, so the person just has to sign it, where the rest of us who objected had to either write in with a letter or an email objection. I also find it a bit disheartening that the MP actually supported this project when I've contacted her on a few occasions trying to raise kind of awareness or motions that are going through Parliament to support alternatives for my house, and she's failed to comply with those requests or failed to actually support those ones, one of them being the HVO operation which George Eustace, the MP for Camborne, put through the Houses of Parliament last year. We also understand that the facility is going to stand for 40 years. My understanding is that there is a number of areas where to dispose of those panels. I don't believe we have that facility within the UK at present. I'm also doubtful for the so-called community benefit. I'm really doubtful that that community benefit will come back into Het and Croxdale area. And I read the consumer survey or community survey that was actually input, where the representatives that I spoke to, when I asked them for the percentages for objection or support, at that point when they spoke to me, they said to me that all of the communications that they'd received on that day, the last 2 days, were against it, where the report itself indicates there's only 16% of the 134 are actually contacted. In summary, I believe that we failed to maintain any part of the road or drainage network around this area. We've had a number of excuses obtained from multiple agencies. After COVID, everyone is washing more. We're doing an audit and we will check all practices are in place. We're a multi-million-pound organisation and we can do anything. It's not us, it's the Environment Agency, it's the Water Company and vice versa from all three agencies. And that's the end of my comment, and many thanks for listening to me.
Okay, Jane, you carry on, please.
Good morning. I strongly object to this development. Having done a lot of research over the last 3 years, I seem to think I know a little more of the people who came to visit us. They didn't even get the address right for the village hall. Can I just say, Durham is not a sunny place, especially in winter, the time when we need more electricity. We do though get a lot of rain, which has had a major impact on crops. So to take this land out of commission would be rather neglectful. Agricultural land is a finite commodity. We need food security. And don't say about grazing under the panels. These are arable farmers, and the grass needs to be in the sun, not in the shade. We live 250 metres away from this planned development.
Excuse me just a minute, Jane. Catherine, can you switch your mic off, please?
Okay.
Carry on, Jane.
We live 250 metres away from this development, and nowhere in any of the documents have we been mentioned or even considered. Office-based assessments and poor communication and community engagement has resulted in the lack of local knowledge. Why is it at a very late stage in this planning did the people, sorry, they had Instinctive do an outreach survey, and after 3 days they only managed, as Catherine said, to get 5 people to sign letters of support. All of these people, I checked it out, live in the middle of estates, and this would have no value for them at all.
Sorry, Jane, but we are well over time. I've let you go on a little bit for the interruptions you had. But can you...
Can I just get right to the end? Because obviously, having listened to the previous thing, I don't know why we even here this morning, to be quite honest. This development is purely about money and ticking boxes, nothing to do with net zero. Everybody's going to be getting money, the developers, farmers, county, etc. They'll be getting paid out of our taxes and through our electric bills. This is not cheap, and it's certainly not green.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jane, and I'm sorry I had to stop you. We move over to the supporters next. We've got Katie McGuinness for the applicant, and I guess since I've let Jane go over, instead of the 2.5 minutes, you probably got 3. Followed by Mark Hutchinson, the landowner. He will have 3 minutes as well. Okay, Katie, thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Katie McGuinness. I'm Head of Environmental Planning at Lightsource BP. So as Chris Shields mentions, we have carefully considered the feedback from the last committee in June 2022 and from the community, and we've revised the proposals in response and to address the concerns raised. Firstly, we've removed panels from the south west of the site to reduce the overall development footprint. We have also increased the landscaping and proposed planting of new hedgerows throughout. This will provide greater screening and break up the appearance of the development from nearby and distant viewpoints. This site is well suited for solar. It is close to the substation to connect to the grid. It is not within a national or local landscape designation. It is on low-grade agricultural land, and it has low levels of biodiversity, which would only be improved with additional planting proposed. In developing the proposals, we carried out community engagement in the local area, and earlier this year we conducted surveys at Hetmore, Ferryhill and Spennymoor with over 134 responses. The results showed that 43% of local residents we met were in support of the proposals and 41% remain neutral. This demonstrates that our proposal does have significant levels of support in the local area, with responses recognising the suitability of the site, the contribution to the UK's energy security and environmental benefits. Now, I'd like to reflect on both the need and the benefits of these proposals. Firstly, energy security. The UK government has set a clear target to increase solar capacity by nearly fivefold to 70 gigawatts by 2035. And as a country, we are only at 14 gigawatts and we still have a long way to go. These proposals would provide a significant contribution to the county's renewable energy generation and meet the energy needs of approximately 14,400 homes. Next, the climate crisis. We are in a climate crisis. The impacts are evident, with extreme weather events here in the UK, and these will only become more extreme and more frequent if we don't respond and act now. The climate crisis is the #1 threat to biodiversity and food security. We need to decarbonise our energy system, and these proposals will save approximately 14,900 metric tonnes of carbon per year. I won't touch upon agriculture because Mark Hutchinson here will talk to the quality of the land that we're looking to develop and the benefits for the farming business. In terms of wider environmental benefits,
30 seconds remaining.
The government's 4th State of the Nature report published last year evidences the stark reality that nature is still seriously declining in the UK, and we're one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. These proposals will create new and enhanced habitats for wildlife, providing significant levels of biodiversity net gain, as mentioned in Chris's report. In terms of community benefit, this project, should it be granted permission, will provide a community benefit fund of 500,000 supporting local projects and initiatives. This project will also provide around 3 million in business rates to the council. Finally, I hope that members recognise the changes that we have made in responses to the concerns raised previously, acknowledge the need and the benefits of this project, and vote to support the application.
Thank you, Katie. Mark, where are you? Mark Hutchinson. Just here. Oh, sorry, you've got 3 minutes as well, and Kirsty will let you know when you've got 30 seconds remaining.
Excuse me. Good morning, Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Mark Hutchinson. I am a farmer and one of the landowners committed to this proposed solar development. A comprehensive soil survey which sampled every hectare of the site described the land as slowly permeable, seasonally waterlogged soil underpinned by metres of almost impermeable yellow clay, identifying the entire site as 3B, but more specifically as a Brickfield 3 association soil, defining its land use as stock rearing and some dairying on permanent grassland, with winter-sown cereals grown on an opportunity basis as the only other crops. My father gained the tenancy at Hetmore in 1965, in addition to the tenancy at Croxdale that he was already farming. At that time, the farm at Het supported a small dairy herd and was almost entirely sown with grass. However, as our primary business was arable farming, the land use was changed and we've spent almost the last 60 years trying to grow cereals at Hetmore. The impermeable subsoil causes the land to reach its water-field capacity very early in the autumn, leaving us very few autumn machinery work days. It's usually late spring before it dries out sufficiently to allow any land work and is regularly too wet for timely fertiliser applications, causing winter crops to lose potential and yield. As an example, part of the farm was sown with winter wheat last year. However, the yield averaged 1 tonne to the acre, compared with 3 tonnes to the acre achieved on our more other productive soils. We also use spring cropping. However, the extended periods of waterlogging mean these are regularly drilled late and achieve low yields. The yields at Hetmore have always been considerably lower compared to our other more productive farmland. If we had to rely on this farm without any better quality land to support it, we would no longer be in business. It is not economically viable to grow cereal crops at Hetmore. The changes we've witnessed in the climate have only exacerbated these issues, making it increasingly difficult to establish cereal crops. The approval of this solar scheme at Het would support 4 individual farming businesses, allowing us essential diversification and enable us to focus food production on our better quality land. It would improve the sustainability of our farming practices, as well as help secure our businesses' futures and those of our employees. In addition to this, we would be able to graze sheep alongside the generation of renewable energy. The security fencing provided would allow safe grazing of ewes and lambs without risk from dogs or trespass. In summary, I and the other landowners fully support the application by Lightsource BP to create a solar farm at Hetmore. We have been encouraged by both local and national government to diversify to support the long-term viability of our businesses, as well as food production, and this proposal is essential to that. This application, if successful, will help us achieve the government's goal for a renewed agricultural sector, where farms can be profitable and economically sustainable, contributing significantly to the environmental goals and enhancing biodiversity, all whilst reducing carbon emissions and securing jobs in the rural economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think you did well in the autumn we've had to get a tonne to the acre, but that was in 2023. Well, you wouldn't get that much in 2024, did you?
We were unable to work the land at all at Hetmore in the autumn just past. We had to leave it entirely as stubble, and it was only in the last 4 to 5 weeks that we were able to begin ploughing, and we only actually sowed the site with spring crops about, what was it, 8th of May today, about 10 days ago.
Yes, that's pretty standard across the agricultural industry as we speak. They're just starting to get sown and come through now. Anyway, thanks for that, Mark. Do you want to come back on anything, Chris?
Just to quickly come back on the road. It's probably the easiest to look on. Yeah. So the construction accesses for the site are in the southern area. So they will come off Het Mill Lane through existing field gates in this part of the site, away from the properties to the north. I mean, I can't answer any questions they've got on flooding or issues with the road up there, but the construction traffic will be focused off the A68 just to the field gates in the southern part of the site, and there will be a construction traffic management plan to control that as well. So just to address that point, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members for the speakers? Jonathan, and then Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I note that one of the concerns of the local residents was confidence that a stake in terms of profits from the project would actually be redirected to local communities, or lack of confidence. I wondered whether there's anything the applicant could say to reassure that or provide more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're looking to provide £500,000 in terms of community benefit over the lifetime of the project. £50,000 or £1,000 per megawatt installed will go direct to the parish council, and the remaining £450,000 will be secured and managed by the County Durham Community Foundation, who administer grants for the local area. So what we're working with them at the moment on is defining that area. So it would probably be a 2-3 kilometre area from the site. So those funds could be ring-fenced for people locally to invest in local projects and initiatives, whether they be community-based projects, environmental, sustainable.
It sounds like a lot, Katie, but that's over 40 years, isn't it? The lifetime of the project.
Yes, 40 years.
Which is... Neil, go.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members that what the applicants mentioned there in terms of community benefits sort of sits outside of the planning system, so to speak. It's not something that you can afford weight to in the context of this application.
Any further questions? Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, really. In terms of the change of the plan and policy towards solar farms, where we have to look more positively on the benefits versus in the past where it was a little bit more a different balance. Is there any reason why now we could ever oppose a solar farm? Because it seems like a bit of a Wild West style land grab now, because we look at these at least every 2 months, at least every 3 months, I would say possibly every 2 months there's a new solar farm in County Durham. And then the second question will be, does the council have a policy as to how much megawattage we want in County Durham on solar? Do we have our own limits to these? Because literally, I imagine any bit of land, given the grants that people get for this sort of thing now, you could make a business case for a solar farm. We could end up with the whole of County Durham as solar farms. Thank you.
So in terms of whether an application can be refused, we'll go to that one first. I just want to make the point that the policy hasn't changed since this was first determined. It's just the interpretation of that policy and the advice we've had from inspectors' decisions on our own refusals, i.e. the one at Sheraton and at Merton, and across the country in general, that the weight to be afforded to renewable energy is very significant. So you have to have a major issue for that weight not to be outweighed. On this site, we're not in an area of high landscape value, not an area of outstanding natural beauty. There's no significant listed buildings. None of the constraints that would normally be weighed in the balance against this. We're looking at general amenity and general landscape impact is the main issues here. So we don't have any significant issues there. And perhaps the reasons why seeing more of these sites that don't have these issues is because the developers have put a lot of work into getting the application at this stage and avoided those constraint areas. That they've generally got maps to show what land is available within the county, the region, the country as a whole as to what they can potentially develop, and they'll typically avoid areas where they could have difficulties. Now looking at the limits on megawatts, we don't have any limit on that in the County Durham plan. We're currently working towards adopting a supplementary planning document for solar, but again that doesn't put a limit, it just puts an indication where it is. In the future there might be areas allocated or identified for solar, or preference areas for where it going in the county, but there's no limit on it. And you also put an extra point there about grants available for solar. There are no grants available for it. It has to be fully funded by the developer putting it forward. So this site could be in the region of £20 million to develop. Katie may have a better indication of what that is for you. But a developer has to find that for themselves. It doesn't come from the government. Hope that helps. Thanks.
Thank you. Simon.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Just looking at this, obviously we've had, I know Burnhope came here, and there's been some issues with that since, however, around technicalities. But in terms of Merton and Sheraton, obviously every application's of its own merits. However, in terms of obviously looking at sort of, as you mentioned there, inspectors almost like passing case law or cases on as to what would be. Are there any sort of similarities between the ones that were overturned at Merton and Sheraton that kind of apply in terms of, you know, you mentioned the putting weight on, is it similar sort of agricultural land that would be used, similar sort of scope of size, just in terms, obviously, when we're putting weight on, it would give an idea in terms of putting that weight down. Because I think the other side of it as well is even in that, were we awarded costs against us during things like the appeals, because that would obviously indicate there that we should have given more weight or more consideration at that point.
Yeah, that's no problem in both those cases. As you say, every case on its merits, and they're both different sites to this one. This is a relatively flat site, whereas Merton and Sheraton were undulating or slightly hilly. Look at Merton first, which was a site within a very developed area relative to this, I suppose, in that the site was surrounded by like a close proximity of housing, which was Merton that overlooks it, and then you had the Jade Business Park to the south of it. So you had that, I suppose, urbanising effect there. In that case, we had quite a lot of objections from the public. I think it was 70 to 80. Typically, the houses that were overlooking the site there and had a good view of it. In that case, there was more impact to recreational amenity. The solar farm was built around existing public footpaths and bridleways. Again, in that case, the inspector did give significant weight to the renewable energy benefits. It was also agricultural land, slightly different here, more grazed in that area. Sheraton was close to the A19, so there was potential views from the road network around there, the A19 itself and the road across to Hartlepool. Strong views, there's some hillside views. There the land, agricultural again, arable. So it's probably more comparable to this site. The views were perhaps more significant, and in my own interpretation, this site has the least landscape impact of all of them, or least harm. Still harm, but sequentially, we'd probably have Sheraton and Merton would be more harm than this site. Did you have another question there as well, Simon?
It's really in terms of that, I was just asking in terms of it, obviously, for knowing roughly where things stand as well. Did in terms of the inspectorate decisions, did the council incur costs and stuff like that, because that would in and of itself give some sort of weight to the fact that actually the council had taken a big misstep on that, if that was the case.
Okay, so looking at Merton first, because that was the cheaper one, because that was a hearing. The only costs we incurred was having to employ expert witnesses to defend our case, because there's nobody internally that could take a different view from me, and obviously I recommended approval. In that case, the appellant didn't claim costs, so we avoided that. On Sheraton, that was a public inquiry, so we incurred a lot of costs in defending it because we had to employ a barrister, and it was over a longer period. Again, the appellant did not claim costs against us on the decision on that one.
Thank you. Any further questions from members? Just one, Katie, from myself. It's 23 months since this was refused. Why did you not appeal, and why have you chosen to use this route to bring it back?
For various reasons, but one, we want to take on board the comments raised both by the committee and the community, reconsult with the community as well to get that feedback and come back with a better scheme. So that was the first reason. And the second reason as well, as Chris said, the appeal process is lengthy as well and costly, and we thought this would be the better route for all of us to take it through.
Thank you for that. Any further questions from members? No, well, we'll move into the debate then. Simon and then Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think in terms of looking at this, I remember obviously the Burnhope one, where I was on the committee. I think I missed the committee for the other ones. Now, in terms of looking at this, I think from what we've had here is that obviously we've had the officer actually say, in their opinion, whilst there is still harm, there is less harm in this than the ones that the inspector overturned. And I think that would give us a general sort of steer towards how much weight we need to actually apply to the solar farms. I think one of the big parts of Durham is Durham was historically, obviously where the coal came out of, which fired so much of the Industrial Revolution, obviously has kept the power stations and such in the past. I think putting Durham at the front and centre of actually getting something like a green agenda right and actually creating energy for the country is something that would reflect really, really well on the area. And for me, it's the sort of thing that actually future-proofs as well the county in terms of employment and skills. For me, I'm more than happy to move approval on this and go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Simon. Jonathan, next, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was reassuring to hear that there's a mechanism in place to secure some of the benefits in terms of profits directly to the communities affected. I just want to make a few points. To me, the landscape issue is a subjective issue. This is not a development that's going to impact on the ecology in a negative way. In fact, it's going to be considerably beneficial. So you also got to consider this in the context that is a very significantly altered landscape, very much, you know, as a consequence, for example, of the huge Amazon building. So what we're talking about here is a change in the colour of that landscape, and it's a considerable change, obviously. But the planning inspectorate says that considerable weight should be afforded to renewable energy. The weight to be afforded to renewable energy is very significant, and I would just want to put it to members on the panel here that so it should be, because we're right in the middle of a climate and biodiversity crisis. And actually, I know it's really tough to hear, but these very large schemes, solar schemes and wind schemes, are actually the best way we can actually move towards reducing carbon emissions. So, you know, I'm reluctant as well because I hate to see the sort of impacts they're creating. But when you consider the impacts of unrestrained climate change, impacts on farming in particular because of flooding of land that we're seeing right now accelerating, impacts obviously on the appearance of the landscape as we have, you know, long periods of drought, but also very wet periods that completely change the vegetation of the landscape, or will do, and are already beginning to do that. So you know, in 20, 30 years' time, the sort of concerns we have now in terms of landscape impact are just going to be likely to be negligible in comparison to the sort of impact that climate change itself will be creating. We have to do everything we can to tackle this global emergency. And so I'm very, very happy to second the recommendation that's already been put. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Kevin Shaw, please.
Thanks, Chair. There's not really much I can add to the last two speakers. Obviously, I'm going to be fully supportive of this. The benefits are massive. I'd just like to draw the point about the way that the developers have actually handled this. I think it's been very, very responsible in the way that they've dealt with this. Obviously raised the concerns, taken on board the concerns that were previously raised, gone back, reconsidered it, put an amended proposal in and actually brought the community on side with them. I think they should actually be commended for that.
Thank you. Michael.
Just a couple of brief comments. I don't know if it's appropriate, but I'd like it recorded that we should, my opinion is we should have a policy for the county as to how many of these farms we're going to have and what megawattage we will have in the future. Because I do see it as a kind of cut and paste business case into certain types of field. And the other thing I would propose is that we have an open book visibility of what the profit are of the farms, and then a fixed proportion of that is given to the local community to compensate for the loss of landscape. Just if that's appropriate to minute that, I'd appreciate it.
That'll go into the minutes, will it?
Yeah, Chair, that's absolutely fine in terms of feeding into the minutes. Now, clearly we don't have a policy that Councillor Curr has mentioned, and the issue about the financial benefits of the scheme, as I've already advised, it's not something that's material for today.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up what Neil's just said there, as Councillor Carrar and maybe other members are aware, we'll probably this time next year we'll be starting the drafting up of a new County Durham local plan for the county, which will be the whole new updated suite of planning policies. So just to confirm, I think what Neil said, that's something that officers can take away and look at and just see where we get to with that over the passage of time.
Any further comments? I'll just make my own comment, as I often do. For me, it boils down to hate or eat. And what good is hate if you can't eat, if you're hungry? If you take all this land, and I'm not just talking about today's application, but it is nearly 300 acres. If you take all this land out of production, it's not producing grain, it's not producing beef or lamb or internally pigs or something like that. And it's to be decried. And it's yes, we need to produce electricity, but in the right place, and this for me isn't. However, we've finished talking. We have a mover and a seconder to go with the officer's recommendation, which is for approval. All those in favour? All those against? That's approved. So thank you for your indulgence today. It's been a long one.